Surviving the apocalypse one day at a time. KFUG, Fogville.
Okay. No, I see it. So thank you very much, Valerie Starkey, for clearing up the Flava Flav Snoop Dogg thing off mic here while we were getting ready. I really appreciate
I feel like I've learned something.
I really have. I've got no idea. Wow, okay. It is 10:36. Paul Critz with you in community service here on KFUG Community Radio. I've got Mike Thornton along with me at the microphone, and we're joined live in the studio, District 2, right?
Yes.
District 2 Supervisor, Del Norte County, Valerie Starkey. Good morning, Valerie. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, it's our
Appreciate
pleasure to
that.
have you come in.
Thank you.
So, being a county supervisor, is it all you thought it was going to be?
Somebody asked me this the other day, are you still happy? And I'm like, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I even love it on the days where people are yelling at me. So I figured that's my measure, right? Is even if they disagree with me, I'm still in it. I still love it. Every day has been a treat, so, but I am also, you need to know, my love language is the act of service. I don't want to get too deep into all that kind of hubbubaloo, but
How do you do that? I just saw something today. Somebody else in a completely other part of the of the state, mentioned that, and that was his love language. It's the first time I've ever heard that. You're the second person in like 2 hours.
I think it means that you need to look it up then.
No, I don't need an existential mandate from the universe. So I'm sorry. Yes, please continue. That just struck me.
No, but it's act of service, and so for me, being in this role, being in this job, I'm totally feel like I'm in this love relationship with Del Norte County. And so I'm really happy. And I think the relationship's going well.
Well, and that's one of those things. I'm really glad.
Welcome to your intervention, Valerie.
I'm really glad to hear elected officials say that, because I think one of the things that seems to be all too often the case is that people get elected and then over time, or sometimes almost immediately, they forget that they're actually public servants, that they're not public masters.
Yeah.
And
I think that we're, somebody had said something the other day, and we are just so small. I was driving down to Sonoma County, where I lived for 30 years before I moved home. And the town of Windsor is 27,000 people. So one town in their county is the size of all of Del Norte County.
Right.
So I think it's really hard sometimes for us to forget, even because we are in a very small town, and it's like all of our jobs, we all take care of each other. And so I hope I never lose that. And if I do, you have the right now to tell me, get yourself in line, Valerie, because it needs to happen.
Wow, excellent. I think we should point it out too. One of the things that's happening, of course, we all know this, it's COVID. When the fatalities started with the Delta surge, just how quickly it was that, all of a sudden it's like 3-4 people that I knew by name and had interacted with have passed away because of COVID-19. And that seemed to make it, so much more real. That's something that you can really only experience on the scale of like a Del Norte-sized community. But it also seems to, Mike and I have been watching the Board of Supervisors, it seems to finally have awakened maybe some of the, let's say, sleepier supervisors who might have been, coming along slowly behind all of this. It seems like Jerry's paying attention now, is what it seemed like to you. He really it struck him. It seemed like a wake-up call, this latest surge.
Well, if you're going to, say Jerry specifically, I'm going to say that Jerry's always been affected by it. And I know the family personally. He's got grandkids, and, and his daughter was very, very strict with, you cannot see the grandkids during the search. She wanted to protect everyone, and Jerry did too. But it has woke us all up, right? And I'm a very vocal person, always will be, hopefully a very vocal person. And I've been it from the very beginning. Let's do this. Let's figure this out. Let's go. And I don't know if the others are as vocal, because I don't know that they have Facebook pages. And that's really where I voice my opinions, not opinions, my urges, my let's get this done sort of thing. So.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, and we've talked about this with other guests, is it seemed like this crisis, this latest kind of COVID crisis here in Del Norte, was pretty clearly building and becoming, pretty obvious, but only a relatively few elected and community leaders seem to be willing to speak out on that before it just got to the point where we had refrigerated trucks at Weirs and we had, hospital like full every day and people dying every day. And so that so I'm going to try to ask this the way ever that. So what's that dynamic like, right? Because you were one of the people who was like kind of right on board going, sure, I'll do a PSA, try to raise awareness. Not everybody was that quick to be willing to act.
Yeah.
And so what's that dynamic like, right? I'm not asking you to like name specific supervisors and all of that, but just being within the elected part of it, within the administrative part of it, the various departments, all of that. I mean, does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, it does. And here's going to be my very, very political answer, and I am not a politician, is that I can't speak on behalf of them. You would have
I'm not
to
asking
ask them.
you to.
I can tell you why I did it.
Yes.
And I'll tell you because I personally don't want one member of our community to die. Up until the Delta surge, we had 10. That was 10 too many. Mm-hmm. And then you're right. We started seeing day after day, okay, we know so-and-so's in the hospital on a ventilator and this person, his mother passed away and this sort of thing. And it did become such a terrible, terrible situation for all of us to be in. I'm sorry it took that for some people to wake up, but it's what it did. And are we all still completely woken up? I don't know, I try and approach everything with, we've got this problem, all right? And first of all, we got to identify what is the problem. The problem is that we don't want people to die in our community, right? So how we approach it is going to come from a bunch of different angles. And I really think that we need to put the problem in front of all of us instead of between all of us. And so if it's in front of us, we are all coming at it for whatever way that we can get it to be resolved. And so that's just how I look at it. I can't speak on behalf of the other elected officials. Somebody on Facebook, and I have a thick skin, but somebody posted, where are our leaders? And it was somebody in the county administration that did that. And I was like, we can only lead with the information that we have. And so I did start asking for more information. I started saying, I want a daily briefing. I want to know exactly what's going on, because how can you lead if you're just getting as much information as everybody else? So, you have to get that first. And so you get ahead of it. And so you can start encouraging people to change behaviors and patterns and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope you understand I'm not coming and asking, hey, what's the skinny? What's really going on behind the scenes there? It's just we asked City Council and Board of Supervisors to get on board with something that Dr. Raywald a few months ago had actually suggested at a meeting, which was lend your voices to the fray, go on social media, get people vaccinated. 10 people we approached, we had 2 responses, you and Blake Inscore from the City Council, and that was it. So when somebody says like, hey, where our leader? I can totally understand that, because out here on the outside, all of these things are ramping up. It's getting ugly. It's bad. People are dying, and it took some really, really bad situations to sort of, it seemed like, awaken local government. But you were never part of that. You were always there, and we did the video thing together, and we did Blake as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to talk to you guys about that. I really felt a filter would have been nice. We can maybe work on our filters.
We'll work on that. We'll get the Vaseline for the lens, right? Isn't that what they used to do in the old days?
I was like, oh my gosh, I got old.
But thank you for responding to that. At the time, I was disgusted by 20% response.
Well, yes, but again, I can't speak on behalf of them. I don't know what their reasons were. I can tell you that I'm always willing. I mean, if you email me, I really do try and respond as soon as I get the email.
Right.
Sometimes I have to think on it, but Mike, when you have emailed me, I really do try to be as responsive as possible. And I do want to apologize because I gave you wrong information. That was information that was given to me. I fed it to you, and it turns out it ends up being wrong. That's a frustrating thing, right? But I do try and just to be responsive, because I think that is my job. Yeah. That's what I'm being paid to do. It's what I was elected to do, and then I take pride in it.
Thank you. That's refreshing. That's
and
nice.
we're speaking with Norte County Supervisor Valerie Starkey. This is KFUG, Crescent City. No, and I appreciate you saying that, and not because of just that one thing, right? Because this has been an issue that I've had with a lot of different elected officials, right? And it's like, it's okay if you are making an honest effort to try and do what's best on behalf of the community, and it's like there's a mistake, just like I made a mistake, right? And I think one of the things that happens is that whether it's electeds or agency heads or whatever, there's like such a mentality, like a bunker mentality, right? It's like, oh my God, they'll see I made a mistake, or I'm not perfect, or whatever. And it just winds up turning into this thing of like that a lot of energies just kind of goes into like CYA as compared to actually getting the job done. And I had this conversation with a local elected a couple of years ago. I said, just tell people what it is you're dealing with, because most people don't understand all the various contradictions, all the various priorities that are in competition and conflict and all of that. And then people get mad because you never tell them what's going on. Because they don't know. Why should they know? Because nobody ever tells them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, and I don't know if I've mentioned this when I was running, but I was a probation officer for 30 years down in Sonoma County, and raised here, but then moved to Sonoma County. So I have my local roots. But during one of my times, I was doing domestic violence, and one of the offenders had come to me and said, listen, I just can't do it. I just want to do my time and be done with it. We went over all the different ways that he could have maybe not done that, but I'm like, okay. So we walked into court, and I said to the judge, he just wants to do his year in the county jail and be done with it. And the judge says, well, this is a felony. He's looking at 3 years in prison. And it was just like this, oh my gosh, I made a mistake,
Wow.
And so I stood up there and I said, I made a huge mistake. I gave him, improper guidance on this one. And the judge says, oh, no, you don't need to apologize. I'm like, no, I do. Because when we make a mistake, when we do something that affects somebody else because we didn't do things properly, you need to own it. You need to be there. And I'll tell you, that one thing rippled through the domestic violence community. And I know that doesn't sound right, but all the different support groups and that sort of thing. And because if I'm going to expect people to do the right thing, right? And daily, I'm like, you guys got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I'm not doing the right thing, and I'm not owning my mistakes. What is that message is that saying?
Yeah.
And I hope to bring that to this position too. I am going to make mistakes. I probably have made already, a couple dozen, and I don't know about all of them yet, but I mean, I'm going to make mistakes, and people are going to call me out on it. And I'm going to have to then make that choice. Do I say, you know what, I did screw this one up, or do I justify it? We all our instinct is to go to justification.
Sure.
Right? It's like, oh, but, it's like sometimes you got to be like, yeah, no, I screwed that one up. Yeah. And how can we fix it? What can we do better now?
I have a background for several different reasons in 12-step communities, and one of the principles there they talk about is rigorous honesty, right? And when I was wrong, promptly admit it, right? And so, like sometimes promptly for me is like a few days, maybe even a few weeks. You know what I mean? Is to just go, okay, yeah, that's right. I screwed that up. But it's hard to like just immediately in the moment go, okay, I'm going to just be super vulnerable on this, even though I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling like,
right.
but
Our
it's
instinct
important
is to defend ourselves,
yes,
right?
right. And it's important to be able to go, yeah, okay, I got that one wrong.
Yeah.
KFUG Community Radio. It's 10 minutes away from 11 a.m. We've got Valerie Starkey, Supervisor, Norte County, live in the studio with me, Paul Critz, and Mike Thornton. Now, you've talked about, guys, you're coming up on what? So when were you sworn in?
January 4th.
Was that just this year?
It was.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Well, it
all right.
seems like years ago.
So we've talked about, the kind of style and the sort of insights that you've gotten coming to. What are some of the things in these as you've sort of gotten your feet, wet as being a supervisor, what are some of the things you're proud of? What are the opposite of mistakes? What are some of the things that you've accomplished that you want to follow up on?
Well, I mean, and I tell my dad this, and my dad's my mentor, right? And so I get to go out there and we have a beer in front of his barn. But I'll say, I'm kind of a cheerleader, and I, I really was a cheerleader, 1984. But no, so I'll talk with him about like, okay, there's big issues, right? There's super big issues. We've got homelessness. We've got mental health problems. We have all this. And while we are tackling they're not something that you can just accomplish overnight. So some of the little things that I've been able to do is I was able to help facilitate getting a variance for treated wood waste. That was a huge win for me, right? We got that variance,
yeah,
and we were able to now accept it. Now, hopefully, the governor's going to sign, I believe it's AB 339, that will allow us to start accepting treated wood again. But
it doesn't sound like much, but that's a huge deal. That's a big deal.
Yeah. But then also, recently with the COVID surge, we were able to, Kelly Schlong had said, hey, why don't we do something nice for the nurses and the doctors? And so from that, we developed this huge wide community project. And so we had like 50 or 60 people 3 times a week dropping off supplies to either Kelly's house, my house, or my sister's house. And then 3 times a week, we would take carloads full of goods to the hospital. And then from that came the Wild Rivers Foundation contacting us saying, here's $30,000, bring them in a hot meal. So that was felt like kind of a win for me. Yeah. It's like, you stay persistent with something, you have an idea, and it gets bigger and bigger. And pretty soon we're getting messages from a traveling nurse saying, I've been here for 17 days. I haven't had to buy a meal yet. Oh, wow. And I've worked in big hospitals like Duke, and I've never seen this. I've never seen a community respond like that. So those kind of things make you proud, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, those are my little cheerleading big wins, but I still, am happy with that. And moving some of the other stuff forward, the mental health discussion is something that I've been real focused in on. One of my mistakes early on is I pushed too hard too soon. Then I got a lot of pushback from that. So I'm having to come up with a different approach on how to do that, because at the end of the day, we want that problem solved, and the problem is we need more mental health services and more psychiatric services for the people in our community.
What does that look like if it comes to a successful conclusion? When you say we need more, what does that really mean? I
would love to see a 9 or 10 bed psychiatric facility here, at least in our hospital, right? Wow. So that, because a lot of times what happens now is they either through the jail or the police, the law enforcement, they encounter a psychiatric incident and they're bringing them to the ER. Well, our ER nurses are not psychiatric ER nurses. So we definitely need a separate area that they're trained in, that we can keep them, we can stabilize them either prior to having to transport them out of the area to a longer term care, or stabilize them enough to have them back in the community with, real wraparound services and that sort of thing.
Man.
So connected to psychiatric illness, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's going to be a tough question. So I just want
looking forward to it.
I'll get a pad and paper for it.
Because we recently had the police shooting of a resident of Del Norte County. Can I assume that you've seen the video?
Yes.
Clearly distraught. And we're talking about mental health issues. Do you have any thoughts on that? That maybe if we had better mental health services or a different approach to policing, that things possibly could have gone differently?
Well, I mean, this is a tough question.
It is, and we've discussed it a lot, and I just want to set the stage, because we've had a big discussion of, what was this one of those kind of what a lot of us read about, black man gunned down by cops, kind of a BLM moment. This was clearly not that. This is
a mental health issue.
It is a mental health, very complicated, explosive situation.
And we got to throw in there that there was a domestic violence
There was a
incident.
domestic violence, and he was armed.
So, I mean, I'll just say, number one, I was pretty proud of the cops. I felt like and this is just from me seeing that video. That's all I know about it. It's all I know. I felt they stayed calm. I felt that they were trying to get him to step away from the knife. I felt like aside from the fact that maybe he felt surrounded by 3 or 4 cops, and that might have been intimidating, I still felt like they were trying to keep everything low key. Could they have done a few things different, like perhaps getting the victim someplace further away and those sort of things? Perhaps, but I wasn't there. In this particular situation, I can just, with my years of experience with domestic violence, DV is one of the most dangerous crimes, because you got to think that these people that are about to get arrested have everything to lose. They, if they were having money troubles, they're going to have triple the money troubles now, because they're going to be incarcerated. They're going to lose their job. If they were having relationship issues, they're going to have triple the relationship issues now, because some court is going to mandate them into mental health or to domestic violence treatment. It's a 52-week batterers program. It's not like something you just go solve. It's every week for a year with tough restrictions. You miss 3, you're out, and you start over. I mean, there's a lot of different, not that he would have known that, but there's a lot of things that come into play with domestic violence. And I do believe that he was having some sort of issue. But I wasn't in his head, and so I don't know for sure. But I think when he went for the knife and he started to slash towards an officer, I don't know really what else they could have done.
Yeah. Once that line is crossed.
Right. Once that line was crossed. Leading up to it, we can all sit there and say, we should have done this, we should have done that, but we weren't there. Does there need to be more training? Perhaps. But, I know some of those officers had a lot of training. And again, this was an incident that just unfolded. Right. And watching that video, and I'll tell you, I have slow-moed that video. I have dissected that video, because that's just what I do as a person. But it's tragic, and it's tragic for everyone. And I feel for Mr. Anderson's family. I feel for the victim that had to witness that, and I feel for all the officers involved.
Yeah.
I think those are some of the same comments that we were saying.
And I know you say, we don't want to sit here in armchair, afterwards and do these things. But at the same time, I think it's really, really important that we as a community sit here in armchair and do these things afterwards, because I think we need to keep talking about this.
Absolutely. And so, I am not for defund the police. Am I for providing additional services so that when we have a mental health situation, now this one, it's difficult to say, right? He had a knife. He just allegedly had a domestic violence incident, right? So that's a little bit different. But then there are some where, do we need to call in some more mental health professionals and de-escalate? Yeah, that's right. Within reason, of course. And so I will, if that gets approached with us as far as how can we relook at our current structure, I'm more than willing to have that discussion. I think that's an important discussion to have. But I, was in law enforcement for 30 years. I was raised by a cop. I am very supportive of law enforcement, but I am also a person that believes that we can always do better. We can always get better, and it doesn't have to be as it always was.
I like what you said earlier with a different issue, talking about keeping the issue in front of us and not between us. I really like that imagery. That's very important. It is 11 o'clock straight up. You're tuned to KFUG LP Crescent City, 101.1 FM online, kfugradio.org. Paul Critz, Mike Thornton, Community Service. We have Valerie Starkey, Supervisor, District 2 from Delaware County, at the microphone.
Well, so another issue that's in front of us is the issue of homelessness. And recently, I know that the board heard a presentation from True North and local people who have been working for a long time to try and get something done, an actual place for people to go. They're particularly trying to get whatever the arrangement would be, the land at the old juvenile hall. It sounded to me that was something you were in favor of. What's it going to take for them to actually be able to get that or another suitable piece of land? Because this discussion particularly around this issue, but in its most recent iteration, has been going on for a few years, and even more than that. And in the meantime, not all that much is actually getting done. Some things are getting done.
Yeah, and I mean, this is such just a nationwide problem. And if we want to go specific here, the presentation that True North gave was fabulous, and it's great ideas. And I will be the first to say, oh, let's do it, right? But what I miss, because I don't have that upbringing in a political realm, is that there are so many more components to it. And if you saw the parks director, the maintenance director, Alan Windegrove, get up there and say, there's asbestos, there's this. And then I think Supervisor Howard said something about, then it's not going to be on our tax roll. And then we have the neighbors and we have the different things. And so that's where what we need to do, if we are going to be serious about this, let's get them all at the table and be like, okay, here's our problems. And I love to hear people's problems. I want to hear, why won't it work? Let's hear why won't it work. And then we can start with how we can fix it to make it work. Because it's a great location. Will like the chief probation officer Lonnie Raymond said, will it hinder some of his concerns or cause some concerns for him with regard to the location of where the juvenile hall is? Absolutely. But I don't think all homeless are going to attack people, and I don't think all juvenile offenders are going to attack people. But if that is a concern, we perhaps then need to come up with a new route into the juvenile hall. I mean, we can fix some of this stuff. So, my take on homelessness, and if you just bear with me one time, is that, I worked at probation for 30 years. I guess I need to add $1 to the jar every time I say that.
I know. I was going to, how many times are you going to drop that?
Name drop it. But one of the things that we finally got right in that probation field is that we started to assess people based on their risk to reoffend, right? So you had your minimal risk to reoffend, meaning they got in trouble, they're going to self-correct, we're never going to see them again. You got your moderates who are like, oh, you know what, if they don't get the right services, there's a possibility they're going to come back. And you got your high risk that no matter what you do, there's nothing going to fix it, right? That's a little extreme, but... And so I think we need to take that same approach with homelessness in some degree, because I think just that one size fits all isn't going to work here. Not all homeless people want a home. Not all homeless people do drugs. So we have to really kind of figure out what's going to work for this criteria, this group of risk, and then come up with different solutions for each risk group. Mm-hmm. So...
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think sometimes that's part of the problem, is that people are always trying to come up with a one-size-fits-all answer, and it's not the answer, because people are different, they're complicated, different factors have gone into them being in the situation they're in. So that leads me to this question. Sometimes it seems... And this is not something that is endemic to Del Norte County, but that increasingly government and government agencies and entities are basically telling organizations like True North, you go figure it all out. You iron out all the problems. You negotiate with Lonnie Raymond at probation. You figure out how to do the asbestos abatement and all of that. And then when everything is answered, we as a government will deal with it. And I guess my question is, how much real support? They don't have lawyers on staff. They don't have planners on staff. They don't have the resources and professionals that a governmental entity, even as small as Del Norte, has. Is there active participation by the governmental structure to help them iron out these very difficult and challenging problems?
So what I think I'm hearing you say is that should we formulate a stakeholders group type thing? right?
That's exactly what. Yes.
That's exactly well, like they did with the cannabis.
My work here is
with the
done.
cannabis.
No, yes.
And I worked for probation for 30 years. I gotta go.
Wait a minute, I'm gonna go get a big bowl here. But no, like they did with the cannabis.
Yeah,
where
for
there's
sure. What they're doing with Last Chance Grade. I mean,
Right.
what Last Chance Grade is a brilliant approach to how they're trying to solve. And Last Chance Grade is a problem, and I'm
Absolutely.
not ever
Of
going
course it
to.
is.
But what Caltrans did is develop this stakeholders group, and they got everybody. They got all the naysayers. They got the people that were positive. They got the people on the fence. Everybody came to the table, and I do believe that's the approach that we need, right? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, in part, but more than that, where there's so here's the thing, right? Okay, who has a lawyer on staff? Does True North have a lawyer on staff?
I don't know.
Probably not. Does the county have a lawyer on staff?
I do believe so.
Yes. Okay. Does that? Yeah. And you know where I'm going
Yes,
with this.
I do.
Does True North have a planning department and experts in community development and all of the things? Probably not. The county does. Are those concrete resources being put to work in order to help just a group of regular volunteer folks actually work their way? So here's the thing, so I'm watching the thing, right? And
Board of
you're
Supervisor.
Board of Supervisors. I'm sorry, thank you.
The thing.
I'm watching the thing.
I used to work for probation.
30 years though.
And so I'm watching, right? And it's and you're very supportive. I thought Chris Howard really cut to the chase and said, look, the reason we're having this today is so we can have a vote or a determination by the board that if these folks put in all this work, we're not going to pull the rug out from out there later down the road, right? And then Jerry Hemmingson goes, oh, well, maybe they're state land. You should go check into that. Well, wait a minute. Why should they have to go check into that? Now go make your way through the labyrinth of state government and all of that, when if you really want to do that, why don't you have your people do that? And I just, it makes me concerned that they're not getting those resources that they're going to need to actually make this work.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is my biggest frustration so far on the board, and I just attribute it to the fact that I don't know. I didn't know. I don't know how things work. But that is my biggest frustration. Somebody from Klamath emailed me last night saying we've got garbage strewn about out here, and we want it to be taken care of. So my thing is okay, Recology, put a new bin down there. That's not how it works. And you can't just say that. You have to then get into what the problem is, and then it's actually county is responsible for it, and the county hasn't been able to get down there as frequently because of Last Chance Grade, and then blah blah blah. And then
on top of all that, do you have to worry about alienating Bob Berkowitz because that's in his district?
So I
all
adopted
of that too.
Klamath. All right.
Did you?
So when Bob was sick at the first of the year, Supervisor Berkowitz was sick, and I just took over all of his committees because I got time, and I have a little bit of energy, so I'm just I want to do all that, and so I adopted Klamath. And so right now I do kind of take over Klamath, and I do have to worry about
but that's something that you consciously stepped into is to alleviate, take some of the pressure off of Bob.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, he was fighting, so he needed to get better, and he is on the road to recovery.
Good for him. Good.
I do need to step back, but I get attached, and I want to stay with him. So.
and don't get me wrong. I mean, I understand that there, complexes and devils in the details and all of that stuff. I do understand all of that. And that at the same time, a lot of times those complexities and all of that don't have to be all that complex. There's actually ways to cut through that if the people who have the expertise and the authority to like Captain Picard, make it so, right? And that's my concern, because I see increasingly it's citizens groups, it's nonprofits, they struggle mightily, very often trying to do things that they don't have the resources and wherewithal and expertise and authority to actually do. And so is there something in the works like the Cannabis Task Force or something like that where there's actual skin in the game by the county?
Well, this was just last week we had that discussion. So I absolutely believe it should be, whether or not it is or not. you got to remember, I'm just 8 months on this job, 9 months on this job, and I'm still just learning so much. So, I mean, I think it's valid, and I think I'll look into it. But as of now, I don't know how it operates. I'm not sure.
Right.
And I'm not trying to jam.
I'm not
up,
feeling jammed up. I'm just going to be really honest. Right. Is that at this point I don't necessarily know the process, and I can sit there and try and talk my way through it, but you're going to know pretty soon that I'm blowing smoke. So,
but I do know you work for probation.
Yeah, you know what? A few things are clear.
I have actually. I don't.
Please.
I have a specific question, and let me know if this is too soon to move into this, but it relates to your work in probation.
Thank goodness. I might know the answer to something.
Do you have an opinion about SB 823 with the youth probation and the closing of the state facilities?
I do.
I figured.
But my opinion is just the Valerie Starkey opinion. It's not necessarily Valerie Starkey Board of Supervisors.
Sure, I'm asking Valerie Starkey, who worked for probation for 30 years. That's what that's the
I did the last stint in juvenile. So the closure of DJJ, I don't think that was the most brilliant move.
Really?
However, if California did anything right, one thing that they've done right is their response to juvenile crime. Mm-hmm. And so what we've seen in the last 10 or 15 years is this decrease in juvenile crime because they implemented this risk system. A lot of times kids will they'll do a pipe bomb. That's probably a bad example. They'll, I don't want to see steal a pack of gum because that's even stupid too, but they'll do something dumb, right? That's enough to cause them to get arrested. But they've got parents at home. They're going to be grounded far more whatever the court could give them. There's a response at home. Those kids are never going to get in trouble again. But then you have those kids that, and a lot of times it's circumstances. They were raised in an abusive environment. Mm-hmm. They don't have the moral compass. They weren't raised with that moral compass. So they go out and they commit some pretty heinous crimes. And I've seen them. They're pretty bad. You'll have to do a progressive discipline, but there comes a point where you got to send them to a locked facility. So I don't necessarily think doing away completely with DJJ, but from when we started this process to go down, it started being like, to house an offender, juvenile offender, it was $80,000 a year. Mm-hmm. By the time they had cut down just as many people that needed to go to that higher level of treatment or punishment, we were down to it costing like $275,000 per child to do that. I mean, at some point you gotta okay, this isn't working.
Right. And the cost being because the numbers of
inmates
in custody, of youth in custody, were getting smaller, so the relative cost was being shared a little
exactly.
bit. Gotcha.
You still have all the institutions, you still have all the staff, you still have all the programming. Mm-hmm. So all those costs are still there for a lesser amount of the juvenile offenders.
Right.
So I mean, I get nervous because there are some, and I worked with some, and my favorite kid on probation, I'll never forget this kid, but he was 13 years old. He went into did a home invasion robbery. Wow. And he was so small that the homeowner just stepped on him waiting for the police to arrive, but they had guns and everything. So I mean, it was pretty serious. But so this individual, it's a bad crime, 13. So you do your first step. We try him on probation. He can't hang in the community. He was a gang member and that sort of thing. And then after that, you go to a group home, and then, out of county group home. And they used to call them group homes. They call them something else now. And then he went out of state. And I had him, I'd go to Iowa once a month to visit him, and he'd out of state. And so he was doing really well in that, because he was removed completely from this environment and over there doing great. Bring him back, and he just goes right back into those same mm-hmm. behaviors and that same conduct. And so then what's the next step? The next step is DJJ. So, I just feel like there is a use for a DJJ. I don't think eliminating it completely was the best choice, mm-hmm. but that's where we're at. So we need to come up now with a different sort of placement for individuals that need that level of care. Right,
exactly. It's a story we've been following, and it occurred to me that, with your experience in probation, that you probably had a very specific
and I've been asking Chief Raymond to sit in on some discussions with that, because I would love to. I mean, I know Del Norte County is not Sonoma County, and that's where I have my experience, but at the same time, I would love to be able to maybe brainstorm and be part of that solution process for what are we going to do? Del Norte County hasn't had to send anyone to DJJ since it was CYA, and that's been 15 years.
Yeah.
So we've been very fortunate that we don't have that level of crime.
And it's all, and the money the state is willing to pay for each offender that would, in the past, have gone to DJJ is like $125,000. I think there's a boost for rural counties to deal too. But the last update for the story was that Lonnie Raymond was looking at some sort of cooperative association with like probation or law enforcement, whatever the entity is, in Humboldt to sort of pool resources and say, okay, maybe together we can house somebody and provide programming for somebody, but Del Norte by itself can't.
Exactly. But we do that a lot, right?
Yeah.
We have to do that with a lot of our shared interests.
Yeah.
I have an Area 1 on AJ meeting later today, and we share our collective interests with Humboldt County. So, something that's not unique to us.
Yeah.
So one of the things, at least it was my experience, I would teach a class there once a month. It was the juvenile hall, really underutilized.
And for years, it's been like this. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Mike.
No.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering what, that's a relatively new building. What happens with that?
Well, we're still going to have juvenile offenders. You're just not, so, it's just like between jail and prison, right? And so when you go to juvenile hall, it's still a local punishment. But if you were to be saying that there's no more services available locally and the judge finds that you need to be in a higher level of care, currently, or no, that's not even currently. I don't think they're accepting it anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
But then you would have gone to kid prison, is what the simple term of that is.
No, I'm familiar with that. I guess what I'm saying is when you're talking about those economies of scale, don't we have that same problem in our juvenile hall to one degree or another? Because there's very few kids in there, isn't there, for the size of that building?
Absolutely. I think there's only like 10 kids in there at any given time. Absolutely. Could they take a wing of that and make that higher level of commitment care that, whatever it is that local jurisdictions are doing to respond to this? Perhaps they could. Had Bar O still been available, it could have been Bar O. But again, and I'm not going to be popular when I say that, but when Bar O closed, it made sense because the response to juvenile crime has diminished, as it should. We should not be trying as many juveniles as we had. We learned something, we made a mistake, and we corrected it. And so, Bar O closing made sense to me. I know a lot of people were opposed to it, but it made perfect sense to me.
So, and this may be a completely idiotic question on my part, right? So we have the Del Norte County Jail, which my understanding is falling apart. Rather than sinking millions and millions of dollars into building a new jail, what about the possibility of using the juvenile hall as the county jail and then finding a different alternative for the 10 kids that might be in the juvenile hall at any given time?
That's certainly something that would make fiscal sense, and it's something that perhaps they could look into. I know currently we have with Senator Feinstein, she was able to put in for, and I'm not going to get the right wording, but some sort of money from the federal dollars, and she asked for I think $3 or $4 million for us to correct some of the issues at the jail. And I walk through that jail. There is issues in that jail. And so we definitely want to make sure that we get those corrected. So we're hopeful that we will get that money. The problem with Del Norte County is that we don't have a lot of expendable money, right? All of our money is really earmarked for just basic services. So to go in and refurbish the jail is something that we just don't have that money laying around. So something like, switching over to the juvenile hall could work. I think that that's not a bad idea, but I certainly don't know. Again, it's back to there's so many different layers that I don't know about that I'd have to, somebody will say, well, what about financing it? What about, staffing it? What about this? And so there's all those other things that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, and it could be the configuration is more appropriate for youth as compared to adults. I don't know. Just we have this one big building that's relatively new that is
That's still 20 years old. Did you know?
Well, but still,
I know. No, you're right. Yeah.
Underutilized. And then on the other hand, we have this, and I know that other groups are coming to the Board of Supervisors trying to get some of the recovery plan money, but a lot of it is being earmarked for the jail and for reimbursement of county wages and things like that.
Well, but for the jail, a lot of our money is being used for proper medical care. That's a huge chunk. But it needed to happen. I'll tell you, I felt like that was a real important thing. We needed to make sure that they're getting appropriate screenings when they first get into the jail, that their needs are getting met while they're in custody, and that we are able. I just learned the other day that when they're discharged and if they are on psychiatric meds, they will give them 3 days supply of meds upon their release so that they have time to be able to take those and then get over to mental health to get a new prescription. That's huge, because you can't be released cold turkey and not be able to get into mental health for 3 days. You're just now deteriorating everything that you worked hard to get them to stabilize. So I think that was a huge thing that we didn't have before.
So we did some discussion about this issue as well, going with the contract with California Forensic Medical Group, aka WellPath, and WellPath has some issues around having been sued on numerous occasions, as I know you're aware of.
Yeah.
But so you were inside these negotiations. It's a big cost increase between Turtle Medicine and WellPath. But from your inside view of this, you see this as having been the right decision?
Well, it was the only decision. It was the only contract and the only thing that responded to the RFP, the only one that met the criteria. So really, we didn't have any choice. It was the only choice. And so given that, and I've read, you sent me some information about the different lawsuits and whatnot. I mean, that's super common. I mean, and I'm not saying that, I'm not diminishing them by any means, but it's very common for medical malpractice or for jails to have these issues arise. Some of them were very disheartening to read, and I'm not trying to, like I said, diminish that, but at the same time, I just know that this is sometimes part and parcel of a big conglomerate like that, providing medical treatment to a population of inmates. So, I mean, I'm sounding as if I'm diminishing it, and I just don't want you to feel like
I'm not interpreting it that way. I just, for me, I wasn't always this semi-well-adjusted great-grandfather that I appear to be today.
Did it take you 30 years to get there?
It did. It did, almost literally, to be honest with you. And so I've seen what it's like inside county jails and juvenile facilities and all of that. And while, yes, there can be a tendency to frivolous lawsuits, I've also seen the way people in those facilities have been treated. And so my guess is they're not all frivolous lawsuits.
No, I don't feel that way at all.
I'm not suggesting that you're saying that. Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of times we need people that can speak up on behalf of people that aren't going to. And so I appreciate you, and I will always respond to your emails if you have anything. Well, I mean, I just really do appreciate it. So make sure you bring it to me. It makes us see the bigger picture. Sometimes our hands are a little tied, and we, like I said, we only got the one contract. I'm still pretty pleased with them just based on what I'm hearing from our behavioral health board as well as the jail.
I'm interested. There were some things 3 weeks ago, I guess now, an issue about inmates being released from the jail with COVID positive. We heard from sort of back end stuff and a word on our streets about the lack of really like screening new prisoners when they were coming in. And so is it your take then that if that did occur that way, and there was a subsequent, I think, a statement made by Sheriff Apperson saying that, yeah, we had released, or from the undersheriff, we had released new people, or we had released people who had been tested and who had tested positive. Here's why. Was that a function of the medical care available? Because that was also happening the transition week between Turtle and Wellpath. Or was this a larger, more systemic, staffing issue? Is this something that who was at fault for this, or was it something you just fallen through the holes because of when that occurred?
Well, I don't know that we can say fault, but I can say that I reached out as soon as I heard, and I heard the night that they were released. One of my friends called me, and who happened to have a relative that was released and showing up on their parents' doorstep.
Okay.
And the parents are elderly; they cannot take in somebody that has positive COVID.
Sure.
And makes sense, right? So when I reached out to the undersheriff, because I believe Sheriff Apperson had already been gone by then, I don't know, or was in that transition. I'm like, what happened? And it took 2 days for me to get a response on that. And that's frustrating. I'm not going to lie. It is frustrating. But when I got the response, it was 10 inmates were released. 5 were about to be done with their sentence. They had 80% to do, and they were at 73 or whatever it is. So they justified those release. 2 that they were having come back at a later date when they cleared their COVID symptoms. And I believe their turn-in dates are the 22nd and 23rd. So we'll see if they return.
Wow.
And then there was another reasoning for other ones. And the reason that they are telling me that they did that is because they did not have the HVAC system inside the jail that could recycle the air and filter it out.
Okay.
So that was their reasoning to me. Does it still sound terrible in the headlines?
Sure.
Absolutely. And will those 2 people turn themselves back in? Who knows?
That's on them.
It's on them.
Yeah.
Did the jail do the right thing? They did the thing. I don't know if it's right or wrong. They did what they felt they needed to do to try and stop the spread inside the facility.
Right.
So that leads me to maybe a broader question. When it comes to the activities of staff, behaviors of staff in the county jail and or the juvenile hall, who has the responsibility and authority to appropriately oversee those things?
With regard to the sheriff's department, it's the sheriff. He's an elected official. And trust me, I've gone round and round with a few things already.
So the sheriff has sole ability to be able to decide what and what does not happen in the jail, and there's no other recourse to that?
Not by the Board of Supervisors, no. The voters, yes.
Okay. Yeah, okay, right.
With juvenile, it's a little bit different because Lonnie is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. So,
Okay.
But at the same time, I still believe that we should let the department heads be the ones that manage their departments.
Yeah, no, I agree. Micromanaging is a really bad thing.
It's a really bad thing. If somebody calls to me with a complaint, with the jail, the release, I emailed Sheriff under Sheriff Waltz and said, hey, what's happening here? Because a lot of times for me too, and this is another frustration I have being on the board, is that we don't get all the information. So we're hearing it from the public first.
Oh, yeah.
And I would much rather have them just...
Where'd you hear about it first? Facebook?
No, my friend called me.
A friend called, yeah, exactly.
Exactly,
right?
but Facebook, I get all my information from Facebook.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be. I found out that Mike McGuire had set up a tent here for the surge on Facebook, on Mike's Facebook, or Senator McGuire's Facebook. That's frustrating to me. I think that there needs to be a little bit more communication so that when the public comes to us, we can say the reason this was set up was for X, Y, and Z. And so I have had some internal battles with that a little bit, and they've gotten a lot better. Again, I've got a pretty strong personality, and so I do have to dial myself back occasionally. It's just part of my 30 years experience at the Sonoma County Probation Department. No, but no, I mean, it is. I just have a strong personality, and I get that. And I really do need to dial myself back, but I still do want the information because I think that we are more valuable as leaders if we have the information that we can share with the public. Because 9 times out of 10, you can stop a rumor by having all the information. You can say, I know it's perceived that way, but let me tell you why it is. And I think that's important.
It is 11:30.
Oh,
You're tuned to KFUG Community Radio. Paul Critz with you. Mike Thornton, it is community service, and we've got Valerie Starkey. We should probably move toward wrapping this up.
We probably should.
We've subjected you to an hour.
do you have anything that you're wanting to talk about?
Again, one of my cheerleader moments here is if I could just talk about the U.S. Capitol Christmas tree. It is something that is exciting and fun, something positive for our community. The tree will be cut. It's in Six Rivers National Forest, so it's our forest. It's down near Mad River, so it's a little farther. It's going to be up here October 29th. We are going to have a little party at Beachfront Park where people can come and see the tree, Sugar Bear, and sign the banner. And we'll have all sorts of activities for the kids and for the community. It's kind of a celebration of something that we have is going to make 25 stops along the way, one of 25 stops, and we're the first one. We're going to cut that ribbon. We're going to be the first stop. It would be great to see, the community out there writing on the banner, taking pictures of the tree, and that sort of thing before it makes its way down all the way California and then across the country to Washington, D.C.
What day is that again?
October 29th.
October 29th. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And it'll be the day that the last day in school were the kids for Halloween. So we're anticipating the kids will be there in costume. And I think that I might be in costume too. I'm taking suggestions.
Probation officer?
Probation officer. Play nice or go to jail.
Go to Valerie's Facebook page and make your costume suggestions.
That's
So.
Yeah.
I do appreciate you guys letting me come in and just have this real candid conversation. I'm willing to do it at any time. And I hope you invite other supervisors to do the same and city council. I think it's a good way for us. A lot of times on the dais, we're unable to really sit and talk.
Right.
And so I think this is just a really great way for us to kind of get where we're at, how we approach things. I think those are interesting, at least to me. Not just me, but just to kind of find out what direction are we going, why are we thinking like we do, and what can we do to improve. And I'm grateful for this time.
Right. We had Council Member Altman on last week, and Under Sheriff Waltz is going to join us on October 6th. So we definitely want to be able to give our elected and other community leaders an opportunity to be on KFUG and have real conversations like the real human beings they are.
Yep.
Darren Short. I think we had him on when he was running, but I have not had him on as a supervisor. Talking with Darren Short. What kind of guy is Darren Short?
I'll tell you. I'll tell you right now. Darren and I have completely different views on almost every topic, but he is one of the very best human beings I've ever met.
That's wonderful. That's cool.
He's a great guy. We just don't see each other politically. We don't see the same things, but that's okay. I mean, we still there to get a job done. And so.
Yeah. That's the impression I get from him
Real good human
as well.
being.
Cool.
Yeah.
Del Norte County Supervisor Valerie Starkey, thank you very much for being with us on KFUG's Community Service today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
KFUG Crescent City 101.1 FM.